So in this video, we're going to talk about that section of the requirements that says to manage Azure AD objects, specifically users, groups, and devices. Now we can see into this Azure Active Directory account. I'm still running at the premium P2 level. I'm still on that trial. On the left, we have different things that we can manage, including users, groups, and devices. So let's start off by creating a group. Now I've been working with the accounting group up till now, but let's start up with a new group. Let's call this the security group. Let's call these the developers. Of course, you can optionally give this a description, but this is the IT department. And how do people join this group? Well, we're going to have assigned group members for this particular group. Right now, there are none, and we're not going to add any yet. So creating a group is as simple as giving it a name and choosing the group type being security and the membership type being assigned. Okay. If we go back up to the Active Directory, creating users is just as simple, really. So we go up to here. We have new users, and we also have guest users, which are external users. We'll talk about that in a second. But if I go into the new user section, and I'm going to call this Joe Green, and the user ID has to belong to a domain name that is associated with this Active Directory. So I said before, if I want to make Joe Green joegreen@gmail.com, that will get rejected because Gmail is not a verified domain, and it will never be because Google owns it. So this will have to be a domain name associated with this Active Directory. For this particular one, which I've upgraded to P2, the only domain name is scottstestaccount.onmicrosoft.com. Okay, I did a custom domain earlier, but that custom domain is associated with a different Active Directory. Now, at this point, we can associate Joe Green with the developers group. And now we can start to make decisions when we're doing role-based access control that developers have access to these resources, etc. It's assigned a password to him. I can click Show Password, see this. Joe didn't have to modify his password, but I'm not going to do that at the moment. So now we've created Joe Green, and he is a member. I've created him, added him manually. Go back to the groups. We go into developers. We can see now that there is one member, and if we go into the membership, that Joe Green is a member. So we've very easily added users and added groups. Now let's go back to the users. We talked about this concept of the guest user. So within Active Directory, we have this domain name that is associated with it. It could be multiple domain names. In our case, remember, it was scottstestaccount.onmicrosoft.com. But what if we did want to invite Joe Green, I don't know if this is a real person, it must be, through his Gmail account? Well, that would be a guest user, okay? So this is what is called B2B. Basically, we can send him an invitation, and he can authenticate and log in to our Active Directory into any applications that use it using this account, but he's going to be invited by email to do that. And then that person gets an email such as this. So you may want to put a little effort into formatting this, but basically you've been invited to access applications in this organization by me, and click to get started. And then this will take you through a registration process essentially to join that Active Directory account. Now, when we were creating our groups earlier, remember we had the choice of creating several types of groups, one of them being assigned users, which we did for developers, and another type is called a dynamic group based on user. So what is a dynamic group? Well, a dynamic group is basically a group that you can set a rule that will auto add people to that group based on the rule. So for instance, I want to create this dynamic group called the Scotts, and it's going to contain anyone whose name begins with Scott. And so I'm going to go down here to display name, and I'm going to say starts with down here, and I'm going to say Scott. So anyone whose display name starts with Scott will then be added dynamically to the Scott's group. Add query, and then I'm going to click create. And so it's going to create this dynamic group, and you can do that not only based on their attributes as a user, but also the attributes of their devices, which we haven't really talked about devices yet. You can see here I created a group for Joe's, and it's a dynamic group, the same rules as the Scott group. And so anyone whose display name starts with the word letters J-O-E got added dynamically to the Joe's. And if I was to create another user, call him Joe, he would also be part of the Joe's group. So now we can control. Now this is obviously a simple example based on their name, but imagine we have a number of other properties that we know about users, especially if you synchronize this with your on-premises Active Directory. And then you can create dynamic groups based on their job title, based on their role within the organization, etc.